Meet Reid Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reid is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reid.
This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio. Happy Saturday, Rocky Mountains. KGAB AM and the Town Square Network and Easy 101 FM, Colorado Springs, Northern New Mexico, and Denver 780, the Big Mouth station. Anyway, today I'm going to kind of set the foundation for you for the upcoming shows. Next week, the week after, we got some big name interviews coming up. An economist who specializes in Detroit, nationally known, written books, forecasts what was going to happen there, just as yours truly did, I might add, a year and a half ago. 2 + 2 is 4. 50 years of Democratic rule, social engineering, wasted money, bought votes. I mean, the result is the result. And we're going to tie that in for you. We're going to tie Detroit's situation into New York's, Illinois', other large cities, California's. And I think you'll see the similarity. And of course, we're going to do a little tie-in when we do that interview too to the national situation, which mirrors, by the way, the municipal and state situations. You've seen what's happened in Europe. You've seen what's happened with Detroit and Harrisburg and Stockton. Guess what, folks? It's just math. And in the end, it catches up to everyone and everything, whether you're a household, a city, or a country like the United States of America. And I'm going to have an interview for you on one of the top specialists in the country on Obamacare. We're going to spend a show or two on Obamacare because the truth is now coming out about this horrendous bill, all the nasties that are buried in it and still emerging, I might add, where it's likely headed. You're all aware it's been postponed by the president, which, by the way, is contrary to law. When there's a law, the chief executive officer can't just change the law. He has to go through Congress. We'll see if Congress makes him do that. But much more importantly, we're going to talk about shall we say, the effect of Obamacare on you and your family. I mean, forget all these big numbers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to tie this in to you, to your everyday life, your everyday health care, and the health, safety, and welfare and finances of your family. I mean, in the end, it comes down to you, right? So those are upcoming. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening with this economy because the proverbial wool is being pulled over your eyes. And by the way, part of that, it's all equated with, I want you to understand the interrelationship. It's equated with policies like those which have bankrupted Detroit, which are permeating this country, except for certain red states, but permeating the country nationally. And it's absolutely equated with Obamacare, the uncertainty of what is not known about that horrific act, and the certainty of the bad things which are now coming to light about it. It's all tied in. And then we're going to talk a little bit about it just came out 2 days ago. It's so apropos because the last two shows have been on Agenda 21. And Agenda 21, you should listen to those shows because if you own real estate of any type or nature, folks, particularly if it's rural, suburban, or exurban, it's going to impact you. And this is in motion. And it's a UN edict that the federal government under Obama has eagerly snapped up and is busily eating and, shall we say, pooping little pellets down to the states and local governments, which are unfortunately eating them thinking they're chocolate morsels, but they're anything but. How's that for a visual for you? Anyway, Obama has come out with this deal. He's going to track the diversity of your neighborhood. Think about that. they are now, the Democrats can't admit that 60 years, $12 trillion, and a bunch of failed programs, graft, and corruption, which bankrupted Detroit and Stockton and is about to bankrupt California and Illinois, and maybe Chicago, I might add. They just can't bring themselves to admit to you, maybe to themselves, I think they know the truth, that these policies result in failure. They result not only in the failure of government and the failure of economies, but they result in social failure. We did a show a week ago with this terrific guy, Colin Flaherty, who wrote this book about White Girl Bleed a Lot, black on white violence. And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, but there was like 5 stories kind of buried in various papers, Huffington Post, etc., about incidents like that just happened in the last week. But this is social failure. Okay, this is a failure of families. This is a failure of government. This is government social engineering gone awry, and now they're trying to blame it on where people live. Let's go back to the cause. People live where they live because they have been deprived of economic opportunity, and they've been made dependent on the government by the government, because the government, i.e. the Democrats who cater to this crowd, they are buying votes. And independent people think for themselves. Dependent people tend to vote as they're told. It's just the way it is. It's not racist. It's not bigoted. It's not anything. It's not even political. It's just human nature. So we're going to talk a little bit about this new theory that they have that, it's not the failure of their policies. It's really where people live, and we need to more diversify zip codes. Wait till you hear this stuff. It ties right into Agenda 21, which, by the way, and it will be the last time I talk about Agenda 21 for months, because I think, shall we say, we've not beat the horse to death, but I think the horse is live, out of the corral, and stampeding towards you wherever you may live. So we're going to end the last half an hour of this show with a broadcast of my big interview with the Republic Radio Network on this topic, particularly on the relocation aspects of Agenda 21. And some of them are scary. I mean, it's being done under the force of arms in other parts of the world. So you really need to pay attention. This is not some horror flick. This is not some fairy tale. This is really happening. Let's start off with the economy, shall we? We've heard from all these people how it's getting better and unemployment's getting better and more people are working, and there was 180,000 whatever jobs added last month, which was 20,000 more jobs than everybody anticipated. Look, I hate to be a doomsayer, okay? I really am an optimist. I'm not sure you believe it listening to this radio program, but I am an optimist, completely an optimist, and an entrepreneur. And I love this country, and I love my fellow Americans, of whatever stripe they happen to be, whatever color or religion they happen to be, so long as they love America too. If they don't, then I have a big problem with them. And I have a really big problem with the government lying to us. We've had the spectacle of Benghazi, and the lies are ongoing. And they want you to think everything's just rosy and hunky-dory. Well, look, I know things aren't rosy and hunky-dory, and I think a lot of people listening to this radio show know it too. That's not to say that there aren't more people working now than there was a year ago, but this is what they're not telling you. The huge majority of those jobs are not jobs that people train for or want, but that they must take. The huge majority of those jobs are part-time, not full-time. There's a huge problem with underemployment, and there's a huge problem with real unemployment. And it all results from uncertainty. It results from these government's policies, people losing trust in their government through Benghazi and IRS and AP and holders perjury, and I can go down the list. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to bore you with it here. You know what they are, right? If you're unsure that you can even believe your government, you become unsure about other things. If you're uncertain about your government's policies and how they're going to affect you, you're unsure about other things. Now, businesses are people, right? I mean, forget the corporation is a person deal. I'm talking about businesses are run by people. They have minds, they have emotions, they have intellects. They're in business to make a profit, otherwise they go out of business and life gets kind of nasty. They are seeing the same things that you are. And you who are listening to me who are business owners, probably small business owners, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So let me give you the real figures, because the government just doesn't want to do it. Although, ironically, you can find many of them on the Department of Labor statistical website. Yeah, the government itself. They stand up there in front of the TV camera and lie to you when their own websites have the real stats. How come they don't give you that site? Go to www.labor.gov. All right. So, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that the unemployment rate has been like 7.5% in recent months. Wrong. It's 14.3%, folks. In fact, if you get into some minorities, some cities, some locations, it's between 20 and 27%. Some age groups, you know who I'm talking about, millenniums, are over 20% unemployed. That means you want to work and there's no job at all. Now, U6 is the real statistic that the Department of Labor uses to measure real unemployment. That's the 14.3% number. That's what it was in June. That's what it was in July. To put this in perspective for you, and you can go back in the archives, I've talked about Europe. In fact, I was kind of like Detroit, the first to talk about Europe going under. And that's exactly what's happened, although they try and keep that from you too. But to put this in perspective, the 14.3% real unemployment rate as published on our own Department of Labor's statistical website, that is worse than Italy. And Italy is one of the pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, who are totally underwater. The Grecian unemployment hit 27% overall, higher in some demographics this month. So when you think about American unemployment being worse than Italy, and by the way, worse than Ireland, which is also like on the ropes, they've had a horrible time over there. That kind of puts it in perspective, does it not? In fact, the United States real unemployment rate of 14.3% is 3% higher than the overall European Union's unemployment rate. So much for all those people who scream about austerity and how it's ruined Europe. We don't have austerity here and have a higher unemployment rate than Europe, which does have austerity, at least in some sectors. So, whatever. The number of part-time workers, this is a really important statistic, has doubled over the last 5 years. Doubled since Barack Obama took office. It increased by 322,000 people. That's 322,000 part-time positions just since May of this year. Think about that. That's a huge number. The 14.3% U6 number way understates full employment because it includes as employed part-time workers, many of whom want to be working full-time, but can't because of Obamacare and a host of other factors. I don't know if you've ever heard the statistic called the employment to population ratio. It's the lowest in decades. Low is not good, folks. It's an inverse ratio to unemployment. In other words, the higher employment, the higher the employment to population ratio. So when I say it's the lowest in decades, I mean a smaller percent of adults are working. The ratio was 58.7% in June. 5 years ago, After Barack Obama, this is after Barack Obama took office, it was 63%. This is like in the height of the friggin' recession. The participation rate, which is another thing that it's called, employment to population, was 63%. After 5 years of Obama, it's down to 58.7%. Where's this summer of recovery? What happened to all these promises? What happened to 5.2% real unemployment that we were promised? Obviously, it didn't happen. Former BLS Commissioner Keith Hall, I know you've heard his name, he calls the publicized unemployment rate misleadingly low, quote unquote. This is from a government bureaucrat, folks. And his whole interview was recorded in the New York Post, if you want to look it up. It's pretty interesting. A more accurate measure, he says, is about 3 percentage points higher, not including part-time employment or underemployed. So even he acknowledges, and he's a government blah blah blah, 10.6%. The most commonly cited number counts: people who work only a few hours a month as employed. So, in other words, if somebody's working 10 hours a month, that 7.4, 7.5% number actually counts them as employed. Now, you know, and I know in real life, that if you're working 10 hours a month, you're not really employed, are you? I mean, you're employed, yes, but you're not fully employed. You really shouldn't be a decrease in unemployment. At the least, it should remain static, i.e. the 14.3%. So, listen, if the jobless rate is, I'm going to round a number, 7.5%, the government mouthpieces themselves admit it's between 10 and 11%. The Labor Department says it's 14.6%. And RealStatistics.com, which really ferrets out all the nonsense, says it's like 17 or 18%. I guess we all know, at the least, however you want to argue this, whatever ideological bent you are, the unemployment rate ain't 7.5%, and we all know it. Okay. And the unemployment rate, folks, to tie this back into the upcoming shows, is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse because Obamacare will be kicking in on several different facets. To the extent it doesn't kick in, it's going to be uncertain. Either Obamacare is completely revamped so that it's a workable treatise, shall we say, and even the unions who backed it now believe that it's not, or it gets scrapped. And until one of those two things happen, the uncertainty, along with the overall policy uncertainty, along with the huge increase in regulations by EPA and several of Obama's other agencies, along with people's growing and well-founded mistrust in government, even down to, are they telling us the truth, which is usually no, all these things are going to dampen the employment numbers and going to dampen the economy. One of the things that you need to understand, all the blog spots, all the pundits always try and spin this stuff. I'm not spinning it. I'm just giving you the numbers. Okay? You can look at them any way you wish. I know how I'm looking at them. Everybody's free to make their choice in Reid's conservative land. The bottom line of all this is that when you need to think. You heard over the last week, there's been some surprisingly good news. Retail purchases are up 0.6 or 0.7% more than economists anticipated. Folks, look behind the numbers. Do you know what the growth in retail spending was really over the last 90 days if you take out automobiles? 0.1%. The inflation rate, the real inflation rate, was about 1% per month over the last 3 months. The government, the untrue rate that's published was about, give or take, 0.3%. So we have retail growth, which is 30% of the government's stated inflation rate for the same time period. that means we're going backwards. Think about it. If people are paying, everything is based on dollars, not transactions. So if retail sales increase by 0.1%, and let's use the government numbers, and inflation went up by 0.3%, you are really, in terms of real dollars, 0.2% negative. If you use the real inflation rate, you're 1% negative. Look behind the numbers. Retail sales in real dollar terms are going backwards, not upwards. It's not a pleasant surprise, as the left-wing pundits and economists would like to tell you, or as the government would like to portray to keep you happy and content. It's just the opposite. And it all goes back to the same factors, I might add. Trust in government, governmental policy, uncertainty. Things will not get better until those major sicknesses, those major illnesses in our psyche are cured. All right. Look, I think you have my take. I'm trying to remind you that the numbers that you hear on the news, particularly most of the news outlets, they may be real numbers the way they've computed them, but they've computed them wrong. They tell them to you without the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say, and you need to use your head. You need to protect yourself, and you need to make decisions based upon reality, not based upon the trumpeted nonsense of somebody who has a different agenda than telling you the truth. Speaking of which, let's take a short commercial break, shall we? And the publishers are going to play for you a little commercial on my books. Book 3 is getting ready to come out. You'll hear about it here. And by the way, thank you. I mean, Book 1 and Book 2 are just rocking of the Threads Western American Saga series. I mean, just an amazing last 30 or 45 days. Something like 7,000, give or take, Kindle units sold. Wow. Thank you, digital readers, and several thousand print copies around the country, and particularly in the West here. I mean, just an incredible month. And I think Book 3, well, listen, I'm the author and I'm biased. I think you're going to like Book 3 as much, if not more, than Books 1 and 2, folks. So, without further ado, here's a little break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the Obama administration's new plans to track the diversity of your neighborhood by zip code. Ooh, what fun!
Land. For love and money, the beauty of the land provokes something primal. It fills us with awe and makes us yearn for land of our own. My land. Those words evoke a sense of security and a place in the world. Yet the word land also evokes nitty-gritty financial issues, business, improvement, taxes, profit. In Volume 1 of Land for Love and Money, rancher Reid Rosenthal uses his award-winning style to tell us real stories, the hard-hitting truth your banker forgot to tell you about all types, sizes, and locations of land. For those drawn to land purchase, ownership, management, preservation, and sale in good times and in bad. Reid's intense love of the land, his devotion to wild and remote places, and his extensive experience with land purchase and sale throughout 2 continents make him uniquely qualified to write Land for Love and Money. A bestseller already, Land for Love and Money is available at landforloveandmoney.com, Barnes & Noble, Hastings, Amazon, and fine bookstores everywhere.
This is Reid Rosenthal back with you on the Right Side Radio this lovely August Saturday. All right. I promised you we were going to talk about this wonderful new idea of the Obama administration, a direct flow-through from Agenda 21 and Mr. Obama's belief in smart growth. Dial up Barack Obama's smart growth. Google it up. You can listen to him in his own words. Dial up Barack Obama regionalism. Not what you think it is, folks. I've talked about it on the Agenda 21 shows. Listen to them here on the archives, www.ontherightsideradio.com. You need to get acquainted with this nastiness, along with all the other nastiness. So, Anyway, just a couple days ago, how apropos is this? Why can't people live wherever they want to live? It's a free country. Well, not according to our president. So he has new policies coming out of his Department of Housing and Urban Development. We talked about that we talked about how they're involved implementing Agenda 21, and we've talked about how they're involved in implementing other policies of Mr. Obama. The diversity of, I'm reading this, the diversity of each neighborhood in the country will be tracked. I'm going to repeat that. The diversity of each neighborhood in the country will be tracked. And if the area does not meet the standards established by HUD and Mr. Obama, not yours, not other people's, but the elitist standards, then they could face consequences, the cities and counties, etc. Wow. This was reported by CNSnews.com, by the way. And you're welcome to read these articles. There's a number of them out just in the last 2 days because it's so outrageous to read them for yourself. CNSnews.com if you want to read the whole article. So you'll love this little line from HUD, right? Has published a new fair housing regulation intended to give people access to better neighborhoods than the ones they currently live in. Gee, isn't that called upward mobility? Isn't that a function of economic prosperity? And isn't that a function of individual freedom, empowerment? What am I missing here? Let me read you a little part from this new HUD program. The goal is to help communities understand fair housing barriers and establish clear goals for improved integrated living patterns and overcoming historic patterns of segregation. Gee, we're getting back into the race thing. I wonder if that's why a month ago he was talking so much about Trayvon Martin. Remember, folks, nothing here is an accident. There is no coincidences. It's all planned. It's part of a plan. It's part of an ideology. There is always a reason that he says and they say what they say when they say it. The Trayvon Martin thing for him was a platform to launch this new HUD regulation about zip code diversity, which affects your neighborhood, and ironically is detrimental to the people who would love to build themselves up to get in your neighborhood. Let's continue. This proposed rule represents a 21st century approach, oh boy, to fair housing. See, there's that fair word, social justice. A step forward to ensuring that every American is able to choose to live in a community they feel proud of, where they have a fair shot at reaching their full potential in life. That's a quote, by the way, from HUD Secretary Sean Donovan, another progressive lout. So what does all this mean for you? You're shrugging your shoulders, so what? Well, it's kind of like shrugging your shoulders over Agenda 21 or Obamacare. So what? So it's a big deal. It's a big effing deal, according to Joe Biden. That's what he whispered in Obama's ear the night Obamacare was passed. It's a big deal, folks. This affects every aspect of your life, every aspect of your family, every aspect of their future, every aspect of your life and death. Do you understand? It's a big deal. Wake up. What the HUD policy really intends to do is to force neighborhoods into what it believes, its subjective belief, no doubt administered by the White House, we know where they stand on all this, is racial balance, quote unquote. They'll do that by providing government funds to move people from the inner cities to the suburbs. Remember what Agenda 21 is all about? It's about collapsing rural areas. It's about collapsing suburbs and eventually getting everybody into the inner city. What better way to collapse neighborhoods than to bring in folks who have not earned the right to be brought into a neighborhood? And by earn the right, that doesn't mean they just breathe air. That means they work. That means they better themselves. That means they earn the American dream. It's not just given to them. in return for votes. Do you see the same pattern developing here? Here's the bottom line. Where these guys want to go is they want to tell you where to live and where you can't live. And they want to tell everybody what's going to be fair for their living arrangements relative to everybody else, regardless of how productive a member of society they are. Anyway, the whole idea of this diversity police, which is really a stepping stone to Agenda 21's ultimate treatise, the ownership of private property is the root of all social injustice, and everybody needs to live in an 800 square foot cubicle in the middle of a densely packed urban area and bicycle to their government job. That's really the end result. It's very clever, they're kind of taking a step backwards to take 3 steps forward. Think about that. Think about what happened in Detroit, folks. As areas became blighted, when residents that did not earn that area were instead put there by the government on the government dole in return for their votes, and other people left, and the government and the neighborhood decayed and had to be razed and torn down, and 2/3 of the population of the city left. Their tax base went down $300 million, like by half, and the city has now declared bankruptcy. Think about it. It's all tied in. There are no coincidences. And I want you to listen to these excerpts from my interview with Paul on the National Republic Radio network about this very thing, Agenda 21 and relocation, what's happening elsewhere and what they have planned here. And then I'm going to have some scary stuff for you when we talk next week about Detroit, FEMA relocation camps, Russian boots on American soil, and how all that ties in. And then we're going to make the leapfrog 2 weeks from now into Obamacare, because that all fits in too. It's all little pieces of the puzzle which are keeping careful to spread out all over the table so you can't really identify the total picture. It's my job to bring you those pieces. It's your job to think about it and put them together in your head. So, without further ado, here's some excerpts from the Republic Radio broadcast.
Welcome back to Agenda 21 Radio. And with us on the phone right now is Reid Lance Rosenthal. With us on the phone is also Chris Street, our co-host, and he's got a question for you, Reid.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Doing good, Reid. It's kind of like the Fabians, they favored nationalization of land rent because they believe that rents are not earned. So if people have land, they're really collecting something that's unfair called rent. Isn't that an amazing concept?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to that treatise. In fact, the exact words, I paraphrased it before, but the exact words are, private property ownership is the primary cause of social injustice. Wow. Now, think about San Francisco with rent controls, New York with rent controls, the manipulation of commodity prices and food prices on a global level and here in the United States. And you can start seeing where the fingers come into the pie. And, they do it on a whole bunch of levels and a whole bunch of planes. There's so many spears being thrown at our private property and our private property rights that it's a blur. It's like tough to identify which spear is coming at you from which direction when. For instance, the EPA is in on the act. The HUD is in on the act. The Department of Energy is in on the act. They recently published that transportation study. I'm sure you guys are aware of it, about a month ago. And basically what they said was, we're going to start to nudge, to use Cass Sunstein's words, we're going to start to nudge people from moving to the suburbs, from moving out of the cities, and we're going to nudge them back toward dense urban areas. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to stop funding projects like highways and schools in areas which we think, which we dictate, are just not dense enough. Because that ties into Obama's ideology, which is regionalism. And most people don't know what that term is. But in his world, regionalism is It is social injustice for tax monies not to flow to urban areas, because urban areas house the most disadvantaged in his worldview. And when people move out to the suburbs, in his view, that sucks money from the inner cities and decreases their tax revenues. So his ideological regionalism ties in beautifully with the United Nations Agenda 21 doctrine, and he masks it all by calling it, I'm sure your audience has heard this, smart growth.
Yep.
I mean, who is going to be against smart growth or sustainability or environmental quality? I mean, these are all the little fuzzy words, but at the end of the fuzzy words, beyond the period of the sentence, is a big hand making a grab for your wallet, your land, and your rights.
Well, you know, Reid, one of the things that just happened here just recently is that, and Chris is going to report on this a little bit later, but the Department of Transportation just withdrew a $5.5 billion federal loan for the Express West train that was supposed to run in from Victorville area into Las Vegas. And this is a huge blow to California. I mean, at least people would think that. But this is part of what you're talking about there. They just did this, and they did it for the reasons you said.
More and more and more of it.
It is astounding the speed with which they're working. See, I think that they're kind of in a desperation mode right now, actually, in many places. And you're absolutely right, though, about the cities, town councils, the counties, and so on, and regionalism. And we've been putting up the fight here in California about regionalism. We've got one of the granddaddies of them all, and that's the California Air Resources Board, which is regionalism run amok all over the state. And they're the ones that have set up the carbon credit exchange and all that good stuff. So we understand and see what's going on. Unelected officials that are really starting to act like the Stasi of the former East Germany and how they're enforcing carbon codes and regulations without any authority. And, oh, by the way, there's no transparency because they are a part with another corporation out of Delaware, you know, so you can't follow the same open meeting laws that every other agency in the state has. So it's a very sinister group of people. It's actually destroying California. And, you know, we see the regionalism. And I tell the audience the word regional in Russian means Soviet. And that's what they're trying to turn this place into, the whole country. And here in California, because we have the one-party system, we have a supermajority of Democrats in the House, in the Assembly, and also in the Senate, and we have a Democratic governor. They can pass laws as they see fit for anything, and they are doing it, by the way. And they're really trying to limit gun laws, the Second Amendment. They've got 30 new laws in the book that they're trying to push through. I mean, they're trying. This is sinister, but see, what they're trying to do is they're being rushed, I think, right now, because people are starting to find out about what's going on, and people are waking up. And as they wake up, they're going to become a little bit more nervous about what they're doing.
You know, I think, you know, you have another great example in California, the San Joaquin Valley, right?
San Joaquin?
Yes, it's 100,000 acres, you know, shut down because of a fish.
Right.
And you know, let's face it, it's a contrived situation. It's really about the exercise control over food and land and that 100,000 acres of prime ground than it is about that fish. By the way, I did a little checking here while I was talking to you. The name of that 60-acre farm, if people want to check it out, it's pretty interesting. The gentleman's name was Matthew Farrell. That's Farrell, and it was in Missouri. You can Google that up and read about the case. It's bone chilling. And that study that I was talking to people about, they can also read this. It actually came out about March, but it's called the Transportation Energy Futures. And I suggest people read that, because if you happen to live anywhere outside the urban area, this is what this government is planning for you. And it ties into, if you go a little bit further, once again, this is, you know, all the blur of spears coming at us. You should also read the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, because that, when you read that, and you read and understand Agenda 21, and you Google up smart growth and just spend a half an hour on it, and then you look up regionalism and spend a half an hour on it, let me tell you, your hair will stand on end. You'll realize
absolutely
how far
will.
these people have come while the rest of us have been asleep at the switch.
Well, another one where we talk about a land grab of the same nature is what happened in Santa Cruz Island in the Channel Islands off California, off Santa Barbara, in which they came in and they took everybody off the property. People had owned land there since the Spaniards came. They denuded the land and they got rid of all the non-native species of plants and animals. That was in the late 90s. This has been going on since then. Reid, are you ready for maybe a call or two?
Oh, absolutely. And just before the call, I want to just mention to folks: listen, it's not just about you. It's not just about your kids. It's about the principles which founded this country. Because this country, folks, we're the last. Hopefully, we won't wind up like the Alamo, but we are the Alamo of freedom. And trust me on this: the 150 million armed Americans. This is not about gun rights for just us. We're the last line of defense for the planet. And that's really true. Our founders said, the moment the idea is admitted, this is John Adams, the moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, anarchy and tyranny commence. Property must be secured or liberty cannot exist. How true?
Very true. Very true. Lark from Texas, a quick question here for Reid, or a comment? Line one?
Sure. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sound great.
All right, Yeah, I want to point out before I pose a quick question for you, Reid, gentlemen, there is a conservative element to this communitarian agenda, what you term the totalitarian agenda, which is behind Agenda 21. And you can trace this to a book by Robert Nisbet, written in 1953, entitled The Quest for Community. And its subtitle is A Study in the Ethics of Order and Freedom. Now, here's the question that I have for you, Reid. I am constantly amazed at the people that I'm surrounded by. When we speak to things like totalitarianism or even to communitarianism, we have to ask ourselves, well, who are these totalitarians? And who are these communitarians? Mm-hmm. Because to me, they're one and the same. And from where I sit, I'm surrounded by them. For instance, I have to ask you, what is your position about fracking?
I think fracking is a great science. It can be done right. There is absolutely no... In fact, the whole movie, they just lost a major lawsuit, the folks that made that movie about the water burning in the sink. It was all contrived. I mean, they lost millions of dollars in that lawsuit just recently. I think it was just in the last 30 days. Fracking is a great thing. It's a great technology. It should be done right. There are safeguards that can be employed. And look, are you going to get bad folks that get involved in the industry, just like any industry, or just like government? Yes, you will. But it's up to the rest of the industry to police them. And most companies, and I happen to be involved in oil and gas wells, so I know this stuff, most companies are very conscientious. Encana, Black Hill, Williams, these are great companies, and they police themselves in their industry. Because a bad thing by one operator is going to bring the cascade of environmental and governmental nonsense down around all their ears.
Hello, welcome to Agenda 21 Radio.
Hi, Barb from Lake Worth, Florida. I was educated by Henry Lamb, who attended all those international meetings and learned about it. Anyway, most recently I've been attending what they call the 7, SEVEN, and then 50, number 50. It's 750.org. It's a regional plan for 7 counties here in Florida, running from the Keys up to Indian River.
That's regionalism. Well, you got it.
Right. Well, a very smart lady, a retired commercial pilot lady, formed this organization. It's American Coalition for Property Rights, AC, then the number 4, and then PR.org. I'm looking at it on the internet right now. AC number 4, PR.org. And they went out, they educated the people in their community, they educated their commissioner, Bob Solari, and I've heard him speak. He's like out of the pages of the Founding Fathers, a really good guy. Mm-hmm. And they voted themselves out of the 750.
Oh, good. Good.
That's terrific. And I'll tell you, on the Coast to Coast show, which you were listening to, Paul, you remember that gal who called from Hawaii? They tried to resettle her entire town, and they dug their heels in and beat them.
Yep, and that's happening all over the place, and we're trying to get as much information about it, these places that are winning these victories, because we're winning victories here in California, I can tell you that right now, much to the chagrin of these people. Well, they don't like it when they lose, but, you beat them on the facts, and you beat them on the truth, and you beat them at their own game. That's the key thing, is beat them at their own game. Okay, we have another caller for Curtis from Florida, also about land ownership. Go ahead, Curtis. Welcome to Agenda 21 Radio.
Thank you very much for having me on the air, and I really appreciate it. There's no way I can fit a philosophy or a book into one phone call. But I understand, and I don't know what Agenda 21 is. I don't think I'm for it. And I like conservative. I like our Constitution, and I believe in rights, gun rights, land rights, all those things. But one thing you need to consider is that land ownership should be a universal right. You shouldn't have to pay money to put your feet on the earth. Everyone deserves an equal share of the natural resources in their country on their 18th birthday. I shouldn't have to buy my left kidney, my air, my rain, my sun, or my land that God gave me. And the federal government first pilfers all the land, and then it squanders by selling it for token prices hundreds of years before I was born.
Reid, you have a response to that?
I'll address. Look, I first of all, everybody has the opportunity to own.
That's not the same thing. That's saying.
But it is. It is. It's Jefferson's meritocracy. And you have the opportunity to own land. But if you are unfortunate enough to not be able to own land or own real estate or own what we would term property, remember that between the states and between the feds, more than 40% of the land area in the United States is public land that you can access anytime you want. In the West, it's 70% plus, and in certain states, like Wyoming, it's 90% plus. It's a huge, huge expanse of public lands that you can go on anytime you wish, other than if there's fire danger or something localized happening, that you can enjoy, you can hunt on, you can camp on, you can fish on, you can breathe the air. So you see, I think the Founding Fathers and Teddy Roosevelt, who kind of set that up, and there's many things I don't agree with what he did, but in this case, setting up that national preserve, shall we say, which we call the National Forest and Bureau of Land Management, etc., that really accomplishes what you were talking about. The minute you are born, they can take you out in a stroller on that public land.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Curtis, thank you very much for calling in, and we're running a little bit short of time. And, Reid, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's just has been wonderful. I hope to have you on the show real soon again, because, as you know, we have so much to talk about. Go ahead and take it out.
You betcha. Listen, folks, it was great talking to you tonight. Please check this stuff out. Google it up. Educate yourself. Educate your neighbors. Information is the first line of defense. You can stop this, but we can stop this at the local level. The federal level is not. It's kind of impervious right now. Hopefully that will change. So get involved locally. Your state, your county, your town. Understand what the watchwords are. Alert your neighbors. Take a stand. He who does not stand for principles has none. If you want to know more about this, www.landforloveandmoney.com. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Reid, thank you very much for being on the show. Absolute privilege for us to have you here and help us out, get the message out about Agenda 21. Stay tuned for more of Agenda 21.
Traveling far, without a home, but not without a star. Free, only want to be free.
Well, I hope you like those excerpts, folks, and you can see how it ties into how I kind of began that segment of the show. You know, the Department of the Department of HUD and Mr. Obama and the rest of his cronies starting to want diversity by zip code. You have no say. They'll decide what's fair. Fair, 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 fair. Think about it. Have a great Saturday. For those of you in Wyoming, I'll be at the Wyoming State Fair next Saturday, signing books at the Whistle Stop, which is the local bookstore up there, at the Whistle Stop booth and pavilion. Please come by and say hi. My book signing schedule is going to be posted, or might already be posted. Who knows? I'm way behind my staff. Might already be posted on all our different websites, threadswestseries.com, on the rightsideradio.com, landforloveandmoney.com. So I hope to see you at upcoming book signings, beginning with the Wyoming State Fair, then the Utah State Fair, then a bunch of signings over in Utah and Idaho, and then a bunch of signings back here on the Front Range, Wyoming and Colorado. You guys have a great Saturday. Stay safe, stay well, stay wealthy.
For more information about Reid and his work, please go to ontherightsideradio.com. There you can also click to purchase the first 2 volumes of his #1 best-selling historical Western series, Threads West, An American Saga, and Maps of Fate. And now the first volume of his new nonfiction series, Land for Love and Money, is available everywhere, or go to landforloveandmoney.com. That's Land for Love and Money. We'd also like to remind you that if you've missed any shows, you can go to the show archives on Reid's ontherightsideradio.com webpage. We look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of Reid Lance Rosenthal, On the Right Side.